In the state of Oregon, there are various court orders that can be obtained by victims of crime depending on their individual situations. On January 1, 2014, the Sexual Abuse Protective Order, or SAPO, went into effect, which helps fill the gap for sexual abuse victims. This video is designed to give you an overview of the SAPO and why it exists.
The Sexual Abuse Protective Order was pretty narrowly crafted to try to fill a gap that existed for sexual assault victims in our community. And prior to SAPO, the Sexual Abuse Protective Order, being created, victims were pretty much stuck with the protective orders that existed at the time. And so if they didn't qualify for any of those protective orders, they didn't have any protection available to them. So if they didn't qualify for the Family Abuse Prevention Act restraining order or the elderly persons or persons with disability protective order or stalking order, then they weren't allowed any protection as far as an order to tell someone to stay away from them. This primarily affected a couple groups of people, one being child victims of sexual abuse, and neither their parents nor they could qualify for these other orders that existed, so there was no protective order available. Adult victims of sexual assault also couldn't qualify for these other orders if they weren't intimate partners with the offender or if they weren't related either by blood, marriage, or adoption to the offender. If a victim chose to report their crime to police, then potentially they could have access to a no-contact order that flowed from a criminal case. And what we know is that these cases often take a considerable amount of time to be investigated and thoroughly looked into before it's submitted to the DA's office. So that window of time that existed between the report and charges being made and the person being arrested was a real gap for people. There was no protective order in place because until someone's arrested, that no contact order doesn't come into play. So the SAPO can help fill that gap as well. We know that less than 30% of sexual assault victims report their crimes. Then there was nothing flowing from the criminal justice system to offer that protection.
So who is eligible for a SAPO? SAPOs are available to adults as well as minors with a few special details. Minors 12 to 17 years old may petition on their own for a SAPO. Parents or lawful guardians may petition for a person under 18 years of age, but are required to file for children under 12. The abuse does not have to be reported to police before filing for a SAPO. However, when a minor petitions for a SAPO, mandatory reporting will be in effect and it will need to be reported to local law enforcement or the Oregon Department of Human Services. This order is not available against a minor respondent. The petition and respondent must not be family or household members as defined by Oregon revised statutes. And the respondent must not be subject to another order or a release agreement. So what type of abuse allows a person to be eligible for a SAPO? The petitioner must have been subjected to sexual abuse. Sexual abuse also equals sexual contact with a person who does not consent to the contact or a person who is considered incapable of consenting to the sexual act according to Oregon revised statutes. Only one incident of abuse is required. The petitioner must reasonably fear for their safety with respect to the respondent, and the abuse must have taken place within the last 180 days in most cases. When granted, the SAPO is good for 1 year and can be renewable under certain circumstances. The order restrains the respondent from various forms of contact or the attempt to contact. With request and approval, the petitioner may have granted modifications to the order in regards to contact with children, family, or household members. These may vary, so it will be important to read the order that was granted. The procedure to file for a SAPO is similar to other protective orders. All petitions are filed through the court and applications are available at local county courthouses. There is no filing, service, or hearing fees, and a hearing will only take place if requested by the respondent. Enforcement of the SAPO is also similar to other protective orders. The Sheriff's Office will be responsible for entering into LEDS and NCIC databases. The SAPO is enforceable in all states. A petitioner cannot violate the order they are protected in. A violation of the order is subject to mandatory arrest. Violation of the order can be prosecuted in the issuing county or the county in which the violation occurred and is a civil matter with sanctions allowed by Oregon revised statutes. And there is no federal gun liability except for certain minor petitioners. So what resources are available to victims of sexual abuse?
The Oregon Attorney General Sexual Assault Task Force has a website that provides a lot of information and resources for not only for victims, but also for professionals who work with victims. Victims advocates are a crucial resource for anybody within our communities. Our advocates throughout the state have been trained on the sexual abuse protective orders, and they understand the process that's involved, the forms that are involved, and they have a really good way of working with victims to develop safety plans that can walk alongside the protective order if it's granted. The advocates are in DA's offices, the advocates are in our communities, in our community-based programs, and so it's really important for people to know and understand who their advocates are locally. Every county in Oregon has a sexual assault response team, or a SART, and it's a multidisciplinary team that has a purpose of making sure that the communities have a coordinated response to sexual assault. If you're not familiar with who your SART coordinators are, you can call the Sexual Assault Task Force, and they can provide you with the contact information so that you can get in touch with your local SARTs.
The ultimate goal of what we're trying to do with the Sexual Assault Protective Order is ensure the safety of our victims and ensure the safety of our community. As I've talked to law enforcement across the state about this legislation, one of the concerns I've heard is, will this be a detriment to our ability to conduct a good sexual assault investigation? If the suspect knows that the police are involved, is it going to keep us from being able to do pretext phone calls, or is it going to take away our element of surprise in interviewing the suspect? We do this every day across the state, hundreds of times in domestic violence cases. We have suspects that have been served a restraining order, they know the police are involved, they're on supervision, and we still conduct good, effective investigations and hold people accountable for bad behavior.
We hope this video has provided the necessary information about the new Sexual Abuse Protective Order. Because it was intended as an overview, you may have some questions in regards to the SAPO. For information not covered in this video, we encourage you to contact your local advocate, SART team member, or district attorney's office.